Our next fabulous speaker is JF Gauthier, and he is the Silicon Valley entrepreneur and founder and CEO of startup Genome. JF is the world's leading expert in scale-up programs and innovation ecosystem development, advising 150 plus innovation ministries and agencies across 50 countries. JF has founded 5 businesses and led others across 2 continents and 3 sectors, the tech, life sciences, and clean tech, achieving 2 exits plus 1 at the large scale-up stage. He's also an active angel investor and previously worked in corporate innovation, advising companies like IBM, Cisco, Agilent, HP, Genome, and Abbott for the firm of Kim Clark, former Dean of Harvard Business School, alongside Clayton Christensen and other thought leaders from Harvard MBA. My pleasure to welcome JF Gauthier.
Can I come up here? Great. So yesterday we were meeting about Global Karnataka, the initiative, and they were talking about B2B, and I said, oh, B2B, deep tech, that's great, let's talk about that. And they said, yeah, Bangalore to Bay Area. And I'm like, oh, okay, going global, this is exactly what we want to talk about. And of course, I have to have my slides, and they're not on. And so we were talking about, going global. How do we think global after what our fellow speakers have talked about? Act and go global to go global. And Startup Genome started 12 years ago with Steve Blank doing the first and still the only global research on startup success factors, decoding what is the genome of startup success, and then realized what's around the founder and out of his or her control matters even more to your success of your startup than what you can control. And then we moved and coined the word startup ecosystems, right? You've probably heard about also premature scaling, right? That's all Startup Genome research with Steve, and then for the last 10 years, surveying almost 100,000 startup founders and leaders who don't have time to take a survey, and asking them 60 questions about what are they doing so we can find what works and what doesn't work. And then after we exited to Sage, and of course the clicker works, that's great. And we started advising governments and innovation agencies on how to create more startup success, how to grow startup ecosystems faster. And now today we're the world leading advisor and research organization. And we work for national governments and city governments like Tokyo Metropolitan Government, New York EDCs, Seoul Metropolitan Government, Israel Innovation Authority, and so forth. We've worked with 150 governments and agencies in the last few years. And our mission is to increase the success of startups everywhere. So entrepreneurs, the same way Jeff was talking about earlier, in every country can create a successful startup. And it doesn't matter about your gender, your ethnicity, you can do it. And you have the resources in your city to help you do it. The ecosystem, the global startup ecosystem, we're now the publisher of the sector, and it's now worth $6.4 trillion. That is the sum of the valuations of the startups, funding rounds in the last 2.5 years, and the exits of the last 2.5 years. So that doesn't even count the bootstrap startups, $6.4 trillion. But 63% is captured in the top 10 cities, and the top 10 cities are only in 4 countries. So we have a problem, right, to really achieve our mission, because it's still way too concentrated. And that's what convinced me to start advising governments so they would catch up, is this dramatic curves of value. This is the sum of all exits in one city for the last 2.5 years. And you can see where San Francisco is, New York, Beijing, right? And as we started advising Seoul and Tokyo, which was like 15 million, 20 million people cities, we're somewhere on the flat part of the curve. Huge economies. I'm like, oh, wow. And when we saw, we're all old enough to remember that in the 90s, people didn't come about their governments that much about the economy. And then in the 2000s, it seemed everybody was complaining. It didn't matter if the right was in power, the left was in power. This tech wave was hitting every industry and hurting the economies, right? And the value migration so fast that we could not react. And I call it the San Francisco tax, right? You want to do something on the internet and you send 10, 20, 30% of the value to Silicon Valley. You send a check. Seattle also. But that's the tax, the West Coast United States tax. And we need to do something about it. So what then we started working with the government doing is like, yeah, you invest a lot in early stage, creating a lot of startups, innovation entrepreneurs, but they get killed when they start growing. So start asking, how do you create more jobs, economic impact? And of course, it's with the scale-ups. So we started codifying with our research, data-driven research, evidence-based, what makes them succeed. First, my professor, Michael Porter, had problems in competitive advantage of nations is bigger in one city, create more competition and more success. Everybody performs better, right? It's competitive advantage of nations is the book. And he was not data-driven, so I tested it mathematically with our data, and it's true. Bigger ecosystem do better. And more resources, more funding, better talent, more support organization, increases performance. That's true. And then what he called connectivity, which is people helping each other and having relationships, informal and formal relationship with each other. So we codified that with asking founders, how many people do you know, right? Very practical question. How many people do you know? And if you ask them to help you for 1 hour this week, they would say yes, within a week. How many people? And so we started measuring network density. How many investors who had not invested in you? How many experts that you're not paying are ready to spend an hour with you in the community? And then how many hours did someone else, another founder help you, or an investor helps you? We didn't ask how many hours did you help someone else because we figured they would exaggerate. But how many people helped you in the last 2 weeks? Not far memory. And we started, and we had, because we're Startup Genome, and we asked people, give me your revenue, number of paying customers, number of users. Usually people don't answer those questions, but because we're here to help, we publish everything for free on startupgenome.com. Answered. And we started looking at those that were more connected, received more help, probably because they also gave more help. Those who had a higher index of local connectedness saw their revenues grow twice as fast as the ones who were less connected. So for the first time, we're able to quantify that it's not a waste of time for us to connect here, for us to help and care about each other, and founders to actually not just spend all the time on product and raising money, but actually connecting with others and helping others and learning from them and learning while you help others, right? So what we do together is more important than what we do alone. And I always give the example of Zuckerberg, right? People say Zuckerberg, great founder. But what was his chance of success if he had started Facebook in Lagos, right? Is it 0%, 1%, right? So it's not him who created Facebook, it's the Silicon Valley ecosystem where you could find great marketing people, great finance people, great operators, and build Facebook. But if we go further, we wanted to know what drives the creation of global category leaders, big success, right? 100 million, $1 billion. And then it's about the global community. And really, we have a global startup revolution. And we have a global culture of founders. When I talk to founders in Malaysia, they speak the same language as me. And my first experience of that was at the Startup Genome office in 2014. And I have someone from Grab in the conference room, only Malaysians. And I thought I was with Silicon Valley founders. They had the same language, discussed the same issues. We have a global culture. So then global connectedness is the source, and we measure this. Same question, how many people do you know in Silicon Valley, in London, in New York, in Tel Aviv, in Berlin, in Shanghai, in Singapore, right? Places that are nexus of knowledge, and that you could call on this week and it's been an hour to talk to you. And of course, no surprise, Silicon Valley was at the center, New York and London, but that's a global fabric of relationship between founders and of then spreading knowledge, spreading customers, investors, employees, that helps you so much. So this is a fabric of quality relationships. And we started seeing that, you know, being connected to the bigger we gave you the potential to create globally leading business model. Because you know what failed and what succeeded in Singapore, and what failed is not written anywhere. So, and you know it's 3 years ahead of you. If you're in Silicon Valley and you talk to 5 people in your sector, they know what's happening in Berlin and Tel Aviv and Singapore. Someone knows, your investors knows. And so that gives you the opportunity to create something new that builds on what's failed and what succeeded. It's not enough to go global, right? What you need then is to scale up potential of a great idea, but then putting it to the test, right? Like Blank says, it's a customer development methodology. You start talking to customers, and if you talk to customers only where you are, you're not building a global solution. So you need to start talking to others. So at the bottom here, you see global connectedness. So that's each point is a city. The size is the value of that startup ecosystem. And you can see on the y-axis, actually go global. If you want and keep leadership, you need to actually go global, get out of your country, get out of your continent. So the y-axis is the percentage of customers for these scale-ups that are outside of the continent. They really got out of their region, right? So you can see the correlation. And you can be really high at global connectedness and not go global, and that doesn't work. You see the ones that are very connected but very small, these are startup ecosystems that didn't take off because people are connected, but they actually don't go global early enough. They don't start having customer discussions early on about the product to see, am I working on a global problem and creating a global solution, or am I creating a local solution? And you can see the correlation is one of the highest correlation of all our research, 66% correlation between how many people do you know in Silicon Valley, London, and how many customers do you have outside of your continent, right? Completely unrelated questions and yet super connected. And when we looked again, we're getting back to the performance model of the startups, we saw that those who actually went global within 1 to 3 years, and it's not sales and marketing at this point, right? It's customer development. Those that had more than 50% of their customers outside of their country saw their revenues grow 2 times faster. I think it was 2.1 times faster. And we started looking for examples of that, and we saw Stockholm. This was circa about 2015, 16, and they had 5 unicorns. And we're like, wow, small cities, so that doesn't fit our model. They're not big. And they have huge creation of unicorn at a rate that rivals Silicon Valley. We're like, wow, we need to study this. In 2017, we went to apply our survey, and we saw that, what were they doing? High global connectedness, high global market reach. So their startups were getting out of Stockholm, of Sweden, not only going to the UK, but going to the US and Asia to talk to customers and connecting with founders in Silicon Valley and New York. Very early stage. Our surveys are always 0 to 3-year-old startups. So they're not scale-ups that, of course, do it for sales and marketing. They have people everywhere. It's our founders' relationship. So this is, the DNA. And what we started looking at the ecosystem, this is our success factor model of the ecosystem. There's a local system. How do you start growing locally, a startup community? But then later is the global system. And so if you start from global connectedness to what creates a success, right? Global connectedness brings you global knowledge. And then when you apply it to go global, you can create a globally leading business model, and starting having traction, you scale up, you might exit, and if you exit, you return resources to the ecosystem. If you create a big exit, you create attraction because people say, oh my God, Berlin, Stockholm's creating global success. I want to move there. I'm in, I'm in Finland, I'm in Spain. I should go do a startup in Stockholm and Berlin because there I can do it bigger. And you start creating attraction of investors. And I remember we had an investor at Startup Genome that moved to Stockholm in 2017. It's like, this is happening there, I'm moving there. And so this is the cycle, the virtuous cycle of startup ecosystem success. This is Silicon Valley, this is London, this is New York, and this has to be Bangalore, and that's about the flow of people and knowledge and ideas in and out of the ecosystem. People leave Silicon Valley all the time. It's not about not having leakages. Having people leave, like what just happened dramatically during COVID, is helping Silicon Valley, because now we have even more relationships in Paris, in Shanghai, in Singapore than before, and they come back to visit, to raise money, and so we have perfect information in Silicon Valley. We're really at the center of the world. But when you focus on your local market, right, you develop a national product. Maybe a national unicorn if your local market is big enough, like in China and India, but you're not building a global category leader. So then I want to do a world premiere of releasing our latest research that we've been wanting to do for years, which is taking our surveys of startup leaders from 2015 to 2019, 30,000 startups, 18,000 that gave us their URL, and see which one scaled to $100 million and to a unicorn. And when they were 0 to 3-year-old, what did they say in our survey? How can we differentiate them? Research never going to be done again because nobody's doing research, and we've stopped. But we have now these 18,000 startups. We're going to release a big report at GEC in Melbourne in September. But this is a little premiere of what does it say, this longitudinal study. So startups 5 to 8 years later after they answered the survey, saying who scaled. So we had 18 unicorns. We had 650 companies reaching 100 million plus in valuations. And what we learned is, on average, the global scaling rate to 100 million was 3.8%. And then, if you had senior advisors that you gave equity to, like we do in Silicon Valley a lot, your rate of scaling to 100 million was 5.6%, much higher, right? And a lot of cities don't do that. Of course, you need advisors who are worth doing equity, giving equity. You probably have done something that's global stage. They have a lot to bring you. Scale-ups, those that scale, have twice as many advisors they give equity to versus non-scale-up. When they were early stage, not later. And then, if you have 4 or more connections, people you can call on, founders in Silicon Valley, in New York, then you scale. If you have those 2 advisors with equity, 3+, and 4+ connections in top ecosystem, now your scale-up rate is almost double, 7%. And then if you started doing what Steve Blank said, right, if you want to build a global solution, you better talk to global customers early before you finish coding your product. If you had more than 20% of your customers outside your continent, so if you're in Europe, if you're in Sweden, you go to UK, it's not good enough. You need to go to the US, and vice versa. And now you have 10.4% chances to scale to 100 million. And if you didn't do any of those 3 at the bottom, right, you go down the staircase. And now 2% chances, 0.7. If you did none of those 3, you had 0.4%. That's 25 times lower. And these are all actionable items. A founder can do that by him or herself. Doesn't need any help. You just need to get out and find advisors worth giving equity and up. Say, here's 1% over 24 months. Wants to go to Web Summit and big conference and go have drinks and have fun with others. Develop quality relationship about people who care to help them. And finally, using those relationships to reach customers outside and talk to them about their problems, your solutions. So that's very important. I want to finish with a note on India, of course. And I've been talking and touting the success of India last year. And this year, right, well, reports about the last 30 months, which is really the COVID era. And during COVID era is the fastest growing startup ecosystems. Last year, Bangalore, Delhi, Mumbai were the fastest going up in the rankings. And this year again, I'm not going to give you any more than that, but it's amazing. And it's really great to see China has been going the other way. not dropping dramatically, but still going down. And when we look at number of Series B, which is the beginning of the success, right? Series A is one thing, but Series B is, okay, you're doing something that might be really big. I'll reward you with a bigger round. And you can see India did super well, was catching up to China, now going down a bit. But this is the goal, is how do we bring more companies to a NASDAQ IPO, should we say that? NASDAQ IPO from India. And how do we build a program to do this? So that's what we're working on. If you want to help, if you want to hear about it, we'd love to tell you more about that. Thank you. If you want to know more also, we're launching a report on June 15th at London Tech Week at TNW and Viva Tech. So June 15th report is free for everyone, and you'll see all these insights on global startup ecosystems. Thank you.